What motivated me was an interest in seeing that the business perspective was put out during Climate Week. Climate Week often has a lot of panels and meetings on policy and sort of what government's doing and what NGOs are doing. And I wanted a business conference on competitiveness and sustainability as a part of competitiveness.
And how many speakers are here this year?
This year we have over 35 speakers, so we're squeezing them all into one day. So it's
a
very
jam-packed
dense.
day.
It's jam-packed, but I think no one's getting bored or fatigued because we really have some great speakers and some interesting topics.
And so most speakers are from the business community sharing their stories?
Most of them are, yes. I'm trying to think. Some are authors. Some of them are from the NGO community, but I would say 75% of the people on our panels are business people.
And when you're not doing business climate, you're consulting, is that correct?
That's right. I work with corporations on looking at sustainability from the corporate strategy point of view and how to understand transformation and how it happens, and looking at past transformations and using them as a template for how do we get to the middle of this century with an economy that works for billions more people, but doesn't sort of burn out the planet. So.
And what's one example of that you've worked on that you've really been excited about in the past?
Well, one is working with some companies on. One company I worked with was pooling carbon allowances and creating an exchange-traded fund from carbon allowances, and they needed a way to communicate to the marketplace what this was all about, what carbon was about, what climate change is about, and how this is sort of going to be a big business. So it was sort of helping them position this for the marketplace.
Very interesting. And one thing I want to talk about is Moore's Law, because I know you focused a lot on that at this conference. So give us a rundown of what that is and how that applies here.
Okay. Well, the idea of Moore's Law is that expectation drives investment that leads to innovation. That's what we see happen with Moore's Law. Gordon Moore in 1975 said that every 2 years we'll double the number of transistors on a computer chip. And by 2011, it's still happening, and that's 4 decades later. So that couldn't have happened just because Gordon Moore knew a lot about technology, because he could not have understood the technologies that would enable this to continue to happen 30 or 40 years later. So it had to be something else, and what it was a system was created around Moore's Law as an organizing principle, and that system was, the consequence of that system was this continued and very, very predictable doubling of density. So if an organizing principle like Moore's Law can have this sort of galvanizing effect on a growing industry, perhaps there's a similar principle that we can apply to building a sustainable economy over the next 40 years that will also galvanize and organize and create rules of the road and create sort of the catalyst for innovation. So it's understanding transformation in the past and what rules might apply in the future and how we might use them.
And as being a business leader, do you think the business aspect is more important than policy and regulation and those sorts of things to get the market moving?
Well, I think they all have to work together, but I'd say from the business perspective, if business doesn't get this, we're not going to solve this without the business people really seeing this as the opportunity of the 21st century. Because once that's seen, then they'll run with it and the innovation will come. Unfortunately, we seem to be seeing too much of dragging, kicking, and screaming into the reality of climate change rather than the opportunity side. So I think it will happen, that realization will come, and it'll probably come in the next 2 to 5 years where companies are really knowing that if they're not on board on this, they're not going to be competitive. And that was the other aspect of Moore's Law, was if you didn't keep up with it, you'd be out of business. So you had no choice but to keep up with it. So companies that aren't keeping up with understanding the drivers of sustainability will end up being uncompetitive.
And entrepreneurs and business people here at this conference seem on the forefront of this, really making this happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been blessed with some of the great speakers. We have Clay Nessler from Johnson Controls and Mark Vachon from GE Ecomagination. We have Carbon War Room contributing. We have Green Girl Minute interviewing speakers. So we have all the great players here.
Right.
So it's been a great event.